Chapter 16. Catherine's expectations of pleasure from her visit in Milsom Street were so very high that disappointment was inevitable, and accordingly, though she was most politely received by General Tilney and kindly welcomed by his daughter, though Henry was at home and no one else of the party, she found on her return, without spending many hours in the examination of her feelings, that she had gone to her appointment preparing for happiness which it had not been afforded. Instead of finding herself improved in acquaintance with Miss Tilney from the intercourse of the day, she seemed hardly so intimate with her as before. Instead of seeing Henry Tilney to greater advantage than ever in the ease of a family party, he had never said so little, nor been so little agreeable, and in spite of their father's great civilities to her, in spite of his thanks, invitations, and compliments, it had been a release to get away from him. It puzzled her to account for all this. It could not be General Tilney's fault. That he was perfectly agreeable and good-natured, and altogether a very charming man, did not admit of a doubt, for he was tall and handsome, and Henry's father. He could not be accountable for his children's want of spirits, or for her want of enjoyment in his company. The former, she hoped, at last, might have been accidental, and the latter she could only attribute to her own stupidity. Isabella, on hearing the particulars of the visit, gave a different explanation. It was all pride, insufferable haughtiness and pride. She had long suspected the family to be very high, and this made it certain. Such insolence of behavior as Miss Tilney's she had never heard of in her life. Not to do the honors of her house with common good breeding, to behave to her guest with such superciliousness, hardly even to speak to her. But it was not so bad as that, Isabella. There was no superciliousness. She was very civil. Oh, don't defend her. And then the brother, he who appeared so attached to you. Good heavens! Well, some people's feelings are incomprehensible. And so he hardly looked once at you the whole day? I do not say so, but he did not seem in good spirits. How contemptible! Of all things in the world, inconstancy is my aversion. Let me entreat you never to think of him again, my dear Catherine. Indeed, he is unworthy of you. Unworthy? I do not suppose he ever thinks of me. That's exactly what I say. He never thinks of you. Such fickleness. Oh, how different to your brother and to mine. I really believe John has the most constant heart. But as for General Tilney, I assure you that it would be impossible for anybody to behave to me with greater civility and attention. It seemed to be his only care to entertain and make me happy. Oh, I know no harm of him. I do not suspect him of pride. I believe he's a very gentlemanlike man. John thinks very well of him, and John's judgment— Well, I shall see how they behave to me this evening. We shall meet them at the rooms. And must I go? Do not you intend it? I thought it was all settled. Nay, since you make such a point of it, I can refuse you nothing. But do not insist upon my being very agreeable, for my heart, you know, will be some 40 miles off. And as for dancing, do not mention it, I beg. That's quite out of the question. Charles Hodges will plague me to death, I dare say, but I shall cut him very short. 10 to 1, but he guesses the reason, and that's exactly what I want to avoid. So I shall insist on his keeping his conjecture to himself. Isabella's opinion of the Tilneys did not influence her friend. She was sure that there had been no insolence in the manners either of brother or sister, and she did not credit there being any pride in their hearts. The evening rewarded her confidence. She was met by one with the same kindness, and by the other with the same attention as heretofore. Miss Tilney took pains to be near her, and Henry asked her to dance. Having heard the day before in Milsom Street that their elder brother, Captain Tilney, was expected almost every hour, she was at no loss for the name of a very fashionable-looking, handsome young man whom she had never seen before, and who now evidently belonged to their party. She looked at him with great admiration, and even supposed it possible that some people might think him handsomer than his brother, though in her eyes his air was more assuming and his countenance less prepossessing. His taste and manners were beyond a doubt decidedly inferior, for within her hearing he not only protested against every thought of dancing himself, but even laughed openly at Henry for finding it possible. For the latter circumstance, it may be presumed that, whatever might be our heroine's opinion of him, his admiration of her was not a very dangerous kind, not likely to produce animosities between the brothers, nor persecutions to the lady. He cannot be the instigator of the three villains in horsemen's greatcoats, by whom she will hereafter be forced into a traveling chaise and four, which will drive off with incredible speed. Catherine, meanwhile, undisturbed by presentiments of such an evil, or of any evil at all, except that of having but a short set to dance down, enjoyed her usual happiness with Henry Tilney, listening with sparkling eyes to everything he said, and in finding him irresistible, becoming so herself. At the end of the first dance, Captain Tilney came towards him again, and, much to Catherine's dissatisfaction, pulled his brother away. They retired whispering together, and though her delicate sensibility did not take immediate alarm and lay it down as fact that Captain Tilney must have heard some malevolent misrepresentation of her, which he now hastened to communicate to his brother in the hope of separating them forever, she could not have her partner conveyed from her sight without very uneasy sensations. Her suspense was of full 5 minutes' duration, and she was beginning to think it a very long quarter of an hour when they both returned, and an explanation was given by Henry's requesting to know if she thought her friend Miss Thorpe would have any objection to dancing, as his brother would be most happy to be introduced to her. Catherine, without hesitation, replied that she was very sure Miss Thorpe did not mean to dance at all. The cruel reply was passed on to the other, and he immediately walked away. "Your brother will not mind it, I know," said she, "because I heard him say before that he hated dancing, but it was very good-natured in him to think of it. I suppose he saw Isabella sitting down and fancied she might wish for a partner, but he's quite mistaken, for she would not dance upon any account in the world." Henry smiled and said, "How very little trouble it can give you to understand the motive of other people's actions." "Why? What do you mean?" "With you it is not. How is such a one likely to be influenced? What is the inducement most likely to act upon such a person's feelings, age, situation, and probable habits of life considered? But how should I be influenced? What would be my inducement in acting so and so?" "I don't understand you." "Then we are on very unequal terms, for I understand you perfectly well." "Me? Yes, I cannot speak well enough to be unintelligible." "Bravo! An excellent satire on modern language." "But pray tell me what you mean." "Shall I indeed? Do you really desire it? But you're not aware of the consequences. It will involve you in a very cruel embarrassment, and certainly bring on a disagreement between us." "No, no, it shall not do either. I'm not afraid." "Well, then, I only meant that your attributing my brother's wish of dancing with Miss Thorpe to good nature alone convinced me of your being superior in good nature yourself to all the rest of the world." Catherine blushed and disclaimed, and the gentleman's predictions were verified. There was a something, however, in his words which repaid her for the pain of conclusion, and that something occupied her mind so much that she drew back for some time, forgetting to speak or to listen, and almost forgetting where she was, till, roused by the voice of Isabella, she looked up and saw her with Captain Tilney preparing to give him hands across. Isabella shrugged her shoulders and smiled, the only explanation of this extraordinary change which could at that time be given. But as it was not quite enough for Catherine's comprehension, she spoke her astonishment in very plain terms to her partner. "I cannot think how it could happen. Isabella was so determined not to dance." "And did Isabella never change her mind before?" "Oh, but after what you told me from him, how could he think of going to ask her?" "I cannot take surprise to myself on that head. You bid me be surprised on your friend's account, and therefore I am. But as for my brother, his conduct in the business, I must own, has been no more than I believed him perfectly equal to. The fairness of your friend was an open attraction. Her firmness, you know, could only be understood by yourself." "Isabella is very firm in general." "It is as much as should be said of anyone. Firm must be to be often obstinate. When properly to relax is the trial of judgment, and without reference to my brother, I really think Miss Thorpe has by no means chosen ill in fixing on the present hour." The friends were not able to get together for any confidential discourse till all the dancing was over. But then, as they walked about the room arm in arm, Isabella thus explained herself. "I do not wonder at your surprise, but I'm really fatigued to death. He is such a rattle. Amusing enough if my mind had been disengaged, but I would have given the world to sit still." "Then why did you not?" Oh, my dear, it would have looked so particular, and you know how I abhor doing that. I refused him as long as I possibly could, but he would take no denial. You have no idea how he pressed me. I begged him to excuse me and get some other partner, but no, not he. After aspiring to my hand, there was nobody else in the room he could bear to think of. And it was not that he wanted merely to dance, he wanted to be with me. Oh, such nonsense. I told him he had taken a very unlikely way to prevail upon me, for of all the things in the world I hated fine speeches and compliments. And so then I found there would be no peace if I did not stand up. Besides, I thought Mrs. Hughes, who introduced him, might take it ill if I did not. And your dear brother, I'm sure he would have been miserable if I had sat down the whole evening. I am so glad it's over. My spirits are quite jaded with listening to his nonsense. And then, being such a smart young fellow, I saw every eye was upon us. He is very handsome indeed. Handsome? Yes, I suppose he may. I dare say people would admire him in general, but he's not at all in my style of beauty. I hate a florid complexion and dark eyes in a man. However, he's very well. Amazingly conceited, I'm sure. I took him down several times, in my way. When the young ladies met next, they had a far more interesting subject to discuss. James Morland's second letter was then received, and the kind intentions of his father fully explained. A living of which Mr. Morland was himself patron and incumbent, of about £400 yearly value, was to be resigned to his son as soon as he should be old enough to take it. No trifling deduction from the family income, no assignment to one of the 10 children. An estate of at least equal value, moreover, was assured as his future inheritance. James expressed himself on the occasion with becoming gratitude, and the necessity of waiting between 2 and 3 years before they could marry, being, however unwelcome, no more than he had expected, was borne by him without discontent. Catherine, whose expectations had been as unfixed as her ideas of her father's income, and whose judgment was now entirely led by her brother, felt equally well satisfied, and heartily congratulated Isabella on having everything so pleasantly settled. "It's very charming indeed," said Isabella with a grave face. "Mr. Morland has behaved vastly handsome indeed," said the gentle Mrs. Thorpe, looking anxiously at her daughter. "I only wish I could do as much. One could not expect more from him. If he finds he can do more by and by, I dare say he will, for I am sure he must be an excellent, good-hearted man. 400 is but a small income to begin on indeed, but your wishes, my dear Isabella, are so moderate, you do not consider how little you ever want, my dear. It was not on my own account I wished for more, but I cannot bear to be the means of injuring my dear Morland, making him sit down upon an income hardly enough to find one in the common necessaries of life. For myself, it's nothing. I never think of myself. I know you never do, my dear, and you'll always find your reward in the affection it makes everybody feel for you. There was never a young woman so beloved as you are by everybody that knows you. And I dare say, when Mr. Morland sees you, my dear child, but do not let us distress our dear Catherine by talking of such things. Mr. Morland has behaved so very handsome. I always heard he was a most excellent man. And my dear, we're not to suppose, but what if you had a suitable fortune, he would have come down with something more, for I'm sure he must be a most liberal-minded man. Nobody can think better of Mr. Morland than I do, I'm sure, but everybody has their failing, and everybody has the right to do what they like with their own money. Catherine was hurt by these insinuations. "I'm very sure," she said, "that my father has promised to do as much as he can afford." Isabella recollected herself. "As to that, my sweet Catherine, there cannot be a doubt, and you know me well enough to be sure that a much smaller income would satisfy me. It's not the want of more money that makes me just at present a little out of spirits. I hate money, and if our union could take place now upon only £50 a year, I should not have a wish unsatisfied. Ah, my Catherine, you have found me out. There's the sting, the long, long, endless 2 years and a half that are to pass before your brother can hold the living. Yes, "Yes, yes, my darling Isabella," said Mrs. Thorpe. "We perfectly see into your heart. You have no disguise. We perfectly understand the present vexation, and everybody must love you the better for such a noble, honest affection." Catherine's uncomfortable feelings began to lessen. She endeavored to believe that the delay of marriage was the only source of Isabella's regret, and when she saw her at the next interview as cheerful and amiable as ever, endeavored to forget that she had for a minute thought otherwise. James soon followed his letter and was received with the most gratifying kindness. Chapter 17. The Allens had now entered on the 6th week of their stay in Bath, and whether it should be the last was for some time a question to which Catherine listened with a beating heart. To have her acquaintance with the Tilneys end so soon was an evil which nothing could counterbalance. Her whole happiness seemed at stake, while the affair was in suspense, and everything secured when it was determined that the lodging should be taken for another fortnight. What this additional fortnight was to produce to her beyond the pleasure of sometimes seeing Henry Tilney made but a small part of Catherine's speculation. Once or twice, indeed, since James's engagement had taught her what could be done, she had got so far as to indulge in a secret perhaps, but in general the felicity of being with him for the present bounded her views. The present was now comprised in another 3 weeks, and her happiness being certain for that period, the rest of her life was at such a distance as to excite but little interest. In the course of the morning, which saw this business arranged, she visited Miss Tilney and poured forth her joyful feelings. It was doomed to be a day of trial. No sooner had she expressed her delight in Mr. Allen's lengthened stay than Miss Tilney told her of her father's having just determined upon quitting Bath by the end of another week. Here was a blow. The past suspense of the morning had been ease and quiet to the present disappointment. Catherine's countenance fell, and in a voice of most sincere concern she echoed Miss Tilney's concluding words, "By the end of another week." "Yes, my father can seldom be prevailed on to give the waters what I think a fair trial. He's been disappointed of some friend's arrival whom he expected to meet here, and as he is now pretty well, is in a hurry to get home." "I'm very sorry for it," said Catherine dejectedly. "If I had known this before—" "Perhaps," said Miss Tilney in an embarrassed manner, "you would be so good. It would make me very happy if—" The entrance of her father put a stop to the civility, which Catherine was beginning to hope might introduce a desire of their corresponding. After addressing her with his usual politeness, he turned to his daughter and said, "Well, Eleanor, may I congratulate you on being successful in your application to your fair friend?" "I was just beginning to make the request, sir, as you came in." "Well, proceed by all means. I know how much your heart's in it. My daughter, Miss Morland," he continued without leaving his daughter time to speak, "has been forming a very bold wish. We leave Bath, as she has perhaps told you, on Saturday se'night. A letter from my steward tells me that my presence is wanted at home, and being disappointed in my hope of seeing the Marquis of Longton and General Courtenay here, some of my very old friends, there's nothing to detain me longer in Bath, and could we carry our selfish point to you, we should leave it without a single regret. Can you, in short, be prevailed on to quit this scene of public triumph and oblige your friend Eleanor with your company in Gloucestershire? I am almost ashamed to make the request, though its presumption would certainly appear greater to every creature in Bath than yourself. Modesty such as yours, but not for the world would I pain it by open praise. If you can be induced to honor us with a visit, you'll make us happy beyond expression. 'Tis true we can offer you nothing like the gaieties of this lively place. We can tempt you neither by amusement nor splendor, for our mode of living, as you see, is plain and unpretending. Yet no endeavors shall be wanton on our side to make Northanger Abbey not wholly disagreeable." Northanger Abbey! These were thrilling words, and wound up Catherine's feelings to the highest point of ecstasy. Her grateful and gratified heart could hardly restrain its expressions within the language of tolerable calmness. To receive so flattering an invitation, to have her company so warmly solicited, everything honorable and soothing, every present enjoyment and every future hope was contained in it, and her acceptance, with only the saving clause of Papa and Mamma's approbation, was eagerly given. "I'll write home directly," said she, "and if they do not object, as I dare say they will not—" General Tilney was not less sanguine, having already waited on her excellent friends in Pulteney Street and obtained their sanction of his wishes. "Since they can consent to part with you," said he, "we may expect philosophy from all the world." Miss Tilney was earnest, though gentle, in her secondary civilities, and the affair became in a few minutes as nearly settled as this necessary reference to Fullerton would allow. The circumstances of the morning had led Catherine's feelings through the varieties of suspense, security, and disappointment. With Henry at her heart and Northanger Abbey on her lips, she hurried home to write her letter. Mr. and Mrs. Morland, relying on the discretion of the friends to whom they had already entrusted their daughter, felt no doubt of the propriety of an acquaintance which had been formed under their eye, and sent therefore by return of post their ready consent to her visit in Gloucestershire. This indulgence, though not more than Catherine had hoped for, completed her conviction of being favored beyond every other human creature in friends and fortune, circumstance and chance. Everything seemed to cooperate for her advantage. By the kindness of her first friends, the Allens, she had been introduced into scenes where pleasures of every kind had met her. Her feelings, her preferences, had each known the happiness of a return. Wherever she felt attachment, she had been able to create it. The affection of Isabella was to be secured to her in a sister. The Tilneys, they by whom, above all, she desired to be favorably thought of, outstripped even her wishes in the flattering measures by which their intimacy was to be continued. She was to be their chosen visitor. She was to be for weeks under the same roof with the person whose society she mostly prized, and in addition to all the rest, this roof was to be the roof of an abbey. Her passion for ancient edifices was next in degree to her passion for Henry Tilney. And castles and abbeys made usually the charm of those reveries which his image did not fill. To see and explore either the ramparts and keep of the one or the cloisters of the other had been for many weeks a darling wish, though to be more than the visitor of an hour had seemed too nearly impossible for desire. And yet this was to happen. With all the chances against her of house, hall, place, park, court, and cottage, Northanger turned up. Its long, damp passages, its narrow cells and ruined chapel were to be within her daily reach, and she could not entirely subdue the hope of some traditional legends, some awful memorials of an injured and ill-fated nun. It was wonderful that her friends should seem so little elated by the possession of such a home, that the consciousness of it should be so meekly borne. The power of early habit only could account for it. A distinction to which they had been born gave no pride. Their superiority of abode was no more to them than their superiority of reason. Many were the inquiries she was eager to make of Miss Tilney, but so active were her thoughts that when these inquiries were answered, she was hardly more assured than before of Northanger Abbey having been a richly endowed convent at the time of the Reformation, of its having fallen into the hands of an ancestor of the Tilneys on its dissolution, of a large portion of the ancient building still making a part of the present dwelling, although the rest was decayed, or of its standing low in a valley sheltered from the north and east by rising woods of oak. Chapter 18. With a mind thus full of happiness, Catherine was hardly aware that 2 or 3 days had passed without her seeing Isabella for more than a few minutes together. She began first to be sensible of this, and to sigh for her conversation as she walked along the pump room one morning by Mrs. Allen's side, without anything to say or to hear, and scarcely had she felt a 5 minutes' longing of friendship before the object of it appeared, and inviting her to a secret conference, led the way to a seat. "This is my favorite place," said she, as they sat down on a bench between the doors, which commanded a tolerable view of everybody entering at either. "It's so out of the way." Catherine, observing that Isabella's eyes were continually bent toward one door or the other, as in eager expectation, and remembering how often she had been falsely accused of being arch, thought the present a fine opportunity for being really so, and therefore gaily said, "Do not be uneasy, Isabella. James will soon be here." "Psh, my dear creature," she replied, "do not think me such a simpleton as to be always wanting to confine him to my elbow. It would be hideous to be together always. We should be the jest of the place. And so you're going to Northanger. I am amazingly glad of it. It's one of the finest old places in England, I understand. I suppose I shall depend upon a most particular description of it. You shall certainly have the best in my power to give. But who are you looking for? Are your sisters coming? I'm not looking for anybody. One's eyes must be somewhere, and you know what a foolish trick I have of mixing mine when my thoughts are 100 miles off. I am amazingly absent. I believe I'm the most absent creature in the world. Tilney says it's always the case with minds of a certain stamp. But I thought, Isabella, you had something in particular to tell me. Oh, yes, and so I have. But here's proof of what I was saying. My poor head, I had quite forgot it. Well, the thing is this. I have just had a letter from John. You can guess the contents. No, indeed I cannot. Dear love, do not be so abominably affected. What can he write about but yourself? You know he is over head and ears in love with you. With me, dear Isabella? Nay, my sweetest Catherine, this is being quite absurd. Modesty and all that, it's very well in its way, but really a little common honesty is sometimes quite as becoming. I have no idea of being so overstrained. It's fishing for compliments. His attentions were such as a child must have noticed, and it was but half an hour before he left Bath that you gave him the most positive encouragement. He says so in his letter, says that he's as good as made you an offer, and that you received his advances in the kindest way. And now he wants me to urge his suit and say all manner of pretty things to you. So it's in vain to affect ignorance. Catherine, with all the earnestness of truth, expressed her astonishment at such a charge, protesting her innocence of every thought of Mr. Thorpe's being in love with her, and the consequent impossibility of her ever having intended to encourage him. As to any intentions on his side, I do declare upon my honor I was never sensible of 'em for a moment, except just his asking me to dance the first day of his coming, and as to making me an offer or anything like it, there must be some unaccountable mistake. I could not have misunderstood a thing of that kind, you know, and as I ever wish to be believed, I solemnly protest that no syllable of such a nature ever passed between us. The last half hour before he went away, it must be all completely a mistake, for I did not see him once that whole morning. But that you certainly did, for you spent the whole morning in Edgar's buildings. It was the day your father's consent came, and I'm pretty sure you and John were alone in the parlor some time before you left the house. Well, if you say it, it was so, I dare say, but for the life of me, I cannot recollect it. I do remember now being with you, and seeing him as well as the rest, but that we were ever alone for 5 minutes. However, it's not worth arguing about, for whatever might pass on his side, you must be convinced, by my having no recollection of it, that I never thought, nor expected, nor wished for anything of the kind from him. I'm excessively concerned that he should have any regard for me, but indeed it has been quite unintentional on my side. I never had the smallest idea of it. Pray undeceive him as soon as you can, and tell him I beg his pardon. That is, I do not know what I ought to say, but make him understand what I mean in the properest way. I would not speak disrespectfully of a brother of yours, Isabella, I'm sure, but you know very well that if I could think of one man more than another, he's not the person. Isabella was silent. My dear friend, you must not be angry with me. I cannot suppose your brother cares so very much about me. And, you know, we shall still be sisters. Yes, with a blush. There are more ways than one of our being sisters. But where am I wandering to? Well, my dear Catherine, the case seems to be that you are determined against poor John, is it not? I certainly cannot return his affection, and as certainly never meant to encourage it. Since that's the case, I'm sure I shall not tease you any further. John desired me to speak to you on the subject, and therefore I have. But I confess, as soon as I read his letter, I thought it a very foolish, imprudent business, and not likely to promote the good of either. For what were you to live upon, supposing you came together? You have both of you something, to be sure, but it's not a trifle that will support a family nowadays. And after all that romancers may say, there's no doing without money. I only wonder John could think of it. He could not have received my last. You do acquit me, then, of anything wrong? You're convinced that I never meant to deceive your brother, never suspected him of liking me till this moment? Oh, as to that, answered Isabel laughingly, I do not pretend to determine what your thoughts and designs in time past may have been. All that is best known to yourself. A little harmless flirtation or so will occur, and one is often drawn on to give more encouragement than one wishes to stand by. but you may be assured that I'm the last person in the world to judge you severely. All those things should be allowed for in youth and high spirits. What one means today, one may not mean the next. Circumstances change. Opinions alter. But my opinion of your brother never did alter. It was always the same. You're describing what never happened. My dearest Catherine, continued the other, without at all listening to her, I would not for all the world be the means of hurrying you into an engagement before you knew what you were about. I do not think anything would justify me in wishing you to sacrifice all your happiness merely to oblige my brother, because he's my brother, and who perhaps after all might be just as happy without you. For people seldom know what they would be at, young men especially. They're amazingly changeable and inconstant. What I say is, why should a brother's happiness be dearer to me than a friend's? You know I carry my notions of friendship pretty high, but above all things, my dear Catherine, do not be in a hurry. Take my word for it, that if you're in too great a hurry, you will certainly live to repent it. Tilney says that there's nothing people are so often deceived in as the state of their own affections, and I believe he's very right. Ah, here he comes. Never mind, he'll not see us, I'm sure. Catherine, looking up, perceived Captain Tilney, and Isabella, earnestly fixing her eye on him as she spoke, soon caught his notice. He approached immediately, and took the seat to which her movements invited him. His first address made Catherine start. Though spoken low, she could distinguish, "What, always to be watched, in person or by proxy?" "Psh, nonsense," was Isabella's answer in the same half-whisper. "Why do you put such things into my head? If I could believe it, my spirit, is pretty independent." "I wish your heart were independent. That'd be enough for me." "My heart, indeed! What can you have to do with hearts? You men have none of you any hearts." "If we have not hearts, we have eyes, and they give us torment enough." "Do they? I'm sorry for it. I'm sorry they find anything so disagreeable in me. I will look another way. I hope this pleases you," turning her back on him. "I hope your eyes are not tormented now." "Never more so, for the edge of a blooming cheek is still in view, at once too much and too little." Catherine heard all this, and quite out of countenance, could listen no longer. Amazed that Isabella could endure it, and jealous for her brother, she rose up, and saying she would join Mrs. Allen, proposed their walking. But for this Isabella showed no inclination. She was so amazingly tired, and it was so odious to parade about the pump-room, and if she moved from her seat, she should miss her sisters. She was expecting her sisters every moment, so that dearest Catherine must excuse her, and must quietly sit down again. But Catherine could be stubborn, too, and as Mrs. Allen just then coming up to propose their returning home, she joined her and walked out of the pump-room, leaving Isabella still sitting with Captain Tilney. With much uneasiness did she thus leave them. It seemed to her that Captain Tilney was falling in love with Isabella, and Isabella unconsciously encouraging him. Unconsciously it must be, for Isabella's attachment to James was as certain and well acknowledged as her engagement. To doubt her truth or good intentions was impossible, and yet during the whole of their conversations her manner had been odd. She wished Isabella had talked more like her usual self, and not so much about money, and had not looked so well pleased at the sight of Captain Tilney. How strange that she should not perceive his admiration! Catherine longed to give her a hint of it, to put her on her guard, and prevent all the pain which her too lively behavior might otherwise create both for him and her brother. The compliment of John Thorpe's did not make amends for this thoughtlessness in his sister. She was almost as far from believing as from wishing it to be sincere, for she had not forgotten that he could mistake, and his assertion of the offer and of her encouragement convinced her that his mistakes could sometimes be egregious. In vanity, therefore, she gained but little. Her chief profit was in wonder. That he should think it worth his while to fancy himself in love with her was a matter of lively astonishment. Isabella talked of his intentions. She had never been sensible of any, but Isabella had said many things which she hoped had been spoken in haste, and would never be said again, and upon this she was glad to rest altogether for present ease and comfort. Chapter 19. A few days passed away, and Catherine, though not allowing herself to suspect her friend, could not help watching her closely. The result of her observations was not agreeable. Isabella seemed an altered creature. When she saw her, indeed, surrounded only by their immediate friends in Edgar's Buildings or Pulteney Street, her change of manners was so trifling that, had it gone no farther, it might have passed unnoticed. A something of languid indifference, or of that boasted absence of mind which Catherine had never heard of before, would occasionally come across her. But had nothing worse appeared, that might only have spread a new grace and inspired a warmer interest. But when Catherine saw her in public, admitting Captain Tilney's attentions as readily as they were offered, and allowing him almost an equal share with James in her notice and smiles, the alteration became too positive to be passed over. What could be meant by so much unsteady conduct? What her friend could be at was beyond her comprehension. Isabella could not be aware of the pain she was inflicting, but it was a degree of wilful thoughtlessness which Catherine could not but resent. James was the sufferer. She saw him grave and uneasy, and however careless of his present comfort the woman might be who had given him her heart, to her it was always an object. For poor Captain Tilney, too, she was greatly concerned. Though his looks did not please her, his name was a passport to her goodwill, and she thought with sincere compassion of his approach and disappointment, for in spite of what she had believed herself to overbear in the pump-room, his behavior was so incompatible with a knowledge of Isabella's engagement that she could not, upon reflection, imagine him aware of it. He might be jealous of her brother as a rival, but if more bad seemed implied, the fault must have been in her misapprehension. She wished by a gentle remonstrance to remind Isabella of her situation and make her aware of this double unkindness, but for remonstrance either opportunity or comprehension was always against her. If able to suggest a hint, Isabella could never understand it. In this distress, the intended departure of the Tilney family became her chief consolation. Their journey into Gloucestershire was to take place within a few days, and Captain Tilney's removal would at least restore peace to every heart but his own. But Captain Tilney had at present no intention of removing. He was not to be of the party of Northanger. He was to continue at Bath. When Catherine knew this, her resolution was directly made. She spoke to Henry Tilney on the subject, regretting his brother's evident partiality for Miss Thorpe, and entreating him to make known her prior engagement. "My brother does know it," was Henry's answer. "Does he? Then why does he stay here?" He made no reply, and was beginning to talk of something else, but she eagerly continued. "Why do you not persuade him to go away? The longer he stays, the worse it'll be for him at last. Pray advise him for his own sake and for everybody's sake to leave Bath directly. Absence will in time make him uncomfortable again, but he can have no hope here, and it's only staying to be miserable." Henry smiled and said, "I'm sure my brother would not wish to do that." "Then you will persuade him to go away?" "Persuasion is not at my command, but pardon me if I cannot even endeavor to persuade him. I've told him that Miss Thorpe is engaged. He knows what it's about, and he must be his own master." "No, he does not know what he's about," cried Catherine. "He does not know the pain he has given my brother. Not that James has ever told me so, but I'm sure he's very uncomfortable." "And you're sure it's my brother's doing?" "Yes, very sure." "It's my brother's attentions to Miss Thorpe or Miss Thorpe's admission of them that gives the pain. Is it not the same thing?" "I think Mr. Morland would acknowledge a difference. No man is offended by another man's admiration of the woman he loves. It's only the woman who can make it a torment." Catherine blushed for her friend and said, "Isabella is wrong, but I am sure she cannot mean to torment, for she is very much attached to my brother. She's been in love with him ever since they first met, and while my father's consent was uncertain, she fretted herself almost into a fever. You know she must be attached to him." "Well, I understand. She's in love with James and flirts with Frederick." "Oh, no, not flirts. A woman in love with one man cannot flirt with another." "It's probable that she will neither love so well nor flirt so well as she might do either singly. The gentlemen must each give up a little." After a short pause, Catherine resumed with, "Then you do not believe Isabella so much attached to my brother?" "I can have no opinion on that subject." "But what can your brother mean? If he knows her engagement, what can he mean by his behavior?" "You're a very close questioner." "Am I? I only ask what I want to be told." "But You only ask what I can be expected to tell. Yes, I think so, for you must know your brother's heart. My brother's heart, as you term it, on the present occasion, I assure you, I can only guess at. Well? Well, nay, if it is to be guesswork, let us all guess for ourselves. To be guided by second-hand conjecture is pitiful. The premises are before you. My brother is a lively and perhaps sometimes a thoughtless young man. He has had about a week's acquaintance with your friend, and he has known her engagement almost as long as he has known her. Well, said Catherine, after some moments' consideration, you may be able to guess at your brother's intentions from all this, but I'm sure I cannot. But is not your father uncomfortable about it? Does not he want Captain Tilney to go away? Sure, if your brother were to speak to him, he would go. My dear Miss Morland, said Henry, in this amiable solicitude for your brother's comfort, may you not be a little mistaken? Are you not carried a little too far? Well, he would thank you, either on his own account or Miss Thorpe's, for supposing that her affection, or at least her good behavior, is only to be secured by her seeing nothing of Captain Tilney. Is he safe only in solitude, or is her heart constant to him only when unsolicited by anyone else? He cannot think this, and you may be sure that he would not have you think of it. I will not say, do not be uneasy, because I know that you are so at this moment, but be as little uneasy as you can. You have no doubt of the mutual attachment of your brother and your friend. Depend on it, therefore, that real jealousy never can exist between them. Depend upon it that no disagreement between them can be of any duration. Their hearts are open to each other, as neither heart can be to you. They know exactly what is required and what can be borne, and you may be certain that one will never tease the other beyond what is known to be pleasant. Perceiving her still to look doubtful and grave, he added, though Frederick does not leave Bath with us, he'll probably remain but a very short time, perhaps only a few days behind us. His leave of absence will soon expire, and he must return to his regiment. And then what will be of their acquaintance? The mess-room will drink Isabella Thorpe for a fortnight, and she'll laugh with your brother over poor Tilney's passion for a month. Catherine would contend no longer against comfort. She had resisted its approaches during the whole length of a speech, but carried her captive. Henry Tilney must know best. She blamed herself for the extent of her fears, and resolved never to think so seriously on the subject again. Her resolution was supported by Isabella's behavior in their parting interview. The Thorpes spent the last evening of Catherine's stay in Pulteney Street, and nothing passed between the lovers to excite her uneasiness or make her quit them in apprehension. James was in excellent spirits, and Isabella most engagingly placid. Her tenderness for her friend seemed rather the first feeling of her heart, but that at such a moment was allowable. And once she gave her lover a flat contradiction, and once she drew back her hand, but Catherine remembered Henry's instructions, and placed it all to judicious affection. The embraces, tears, and promises of the parting fair ones may be fancied.